Start by going right back to the Kid Galahad days.
Mm-hmm.
How much did that outfit have in common sound-wise with the Saints as it became?
Jesus Christ. I don't know. Kid Galahad, I think, was more of a myth than a reality. I mean, we were very young. At one point, it was, I think I was singing Shuaib's guitar amp, and Ivor was playing a very stupid, horrible, cheesy kind of little electric organ, and I don't think that sounded like anything. But once, so I suppose once it got up and rolling and we actually kind of had the loud drum thing, I suppose it was pretty similar to the Saints.
How would you describe the Brisbane music scene in those early days? Was it a scene you were pretty anxious to get away from?
No, it was a scene that we were really anxious to get into, but no one would let us. I mean, we actually, if memory serves me correctly, I think there was one agency that controlled like live gigs. I mean, and keep in mind, we were quite young and quite green, and we didn't have management, didn't have a clue actually. But I do recall taking a couple of meetings with the powers that be, and even though we did pass a talent competition, we weren't allowed to join the scene, basically. Because I think it was prerequisite that you wore flared trousers made out of satin.
Oh, yes.
It was not a good look, Brisbane in the 70s.
Did hometown acceptance escalate a little bit when the band started getting interest from overseas and elsewhere in Australia as well?
Not really, because in the very early days we didn't play in Brisbane. We did a handful of gigs, and I mean there was a coterie of friends that thought we were like, you know, absolutely marvellous, but it wasn't commercial in any sense. And I think it wasn't until the 1980s I actually started playing Brisbane and doing proper gigs and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's been a kind of an after-the-fact sort of thing. I mean, that's my humble perception.
Yeah.
It may not be the reality.
Did it sit okay with you at the time being labelled in with the punk and new wave scene that was flourishing in England?
Not really. It was, well, speaking personally, I found it a little bit embarrassing. Because you must remember that we went to England fairly early on. It was like early in 77. And I thought that whole English scene was a joke. And I'm sure Eddie or Ivor would probably say the same thing. We thought it was good because it got us the bus fares to go to London, and that was pretty neat. But in terms of feeling any feeling of camaraderie, not really, because the English thing was a little bit more fashion conscious than we were. Mm-hmm. I think. And I mean, if you listen to some of the records from that period, a lot of them sound quite twee and extremely dated. So it was just, it seemed to me just like another fashion cycle, rather than a great musical revolution.
Did you at any stage go to particular lengths to try and shake off that tag?
Most folk that know me know that I haven't ever gone to any great lengths to do anything. Not really. I mean, even in those days, with respect to PR, I was fairly disrespectful. A, about myself, B, about the group, and C, about show business in general. Mm-hmm. So I've always viewed it as just another, marketing tag. And I mean, there was a time there in the mid to late 70s where if you didn't call yourself a punk rock group, you didn't get, the circuit gigs. Yeah. So it's just another kind of convenient label in a world that was becoming then, and is even more so now, very compartmentalized. There are too many experts and consultants working in too many fields. All rather dull, really. I mean, that's the worst thing about the whole punk rock thing. It was meant to be some kind of, manufactured rehash of the flower power hippie revolution. And it Coca-Cola got involved much too soon. It just became another sham.
Has the fact that first version of the Saints has become such a highly revered band worked against you in later years gaining acceptance for your later versions of the band?
It depends on whose living room you're knocking about in, really. I know that Eddie has spent a lifetime denigrating me and mine, and I think that's all right. There are a handful of people who, and funnily enough, probably never saw that group or probably don't even have the records, who've got some kind of mythological view of it. And from a commercial perspective, no, not really. So, no, I suppose.
What about your continual use of the Saints' name? Has that been a source of annoyance? People, questioning your right to do that?
Well, no, I don't even buy into that. The only person that has a slight problem with it is Eddie, and I find that kind of odd. Still, 20 years after the fact. But once again, he has got more mileage out of the Saints than I have in some respects. So I don't really begrudge him that.
So what is the state of play between you and Ed these days?
Well, currently, apparently it's really friendly because, in fact, over the past couple of weeks, we've missed each other about 10 times on the telephone. So, in fact, we're trying to speak to each other. As I speak to you, we're trying to speak to each other.
Oh, that's a positive.
Yeah. I mean, it's been something that's been going on and off for quite a long time. I mean, publicly, I think we're really each other's worst enemy. But I think that in reality, that's not quite the story.
Well,
I mean, I haven't seen the old fruit for ages, so it would probably be quite an interesting little meeting.
Have you kept in touch with his music?
Occasionally I get sent things. The last thing I heard was some instrumental thing, which I just think is garbage. But the record before that had some really neat stuff on it. In fact, he did a rehash of something called Messing with the Kid Part 2, which I think is, dare I say it, it's quite beautiful.
What about the Aints material?
Oh, that's just crap.
Yeah.
With all due respect. I mean, I think the idea's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But, oh no, it's probably brilliant. I hate being bitchy. It's probably great. It probably really is special.
The original bands, did you know right from the start the direction that you wanted to take for the next version of the Saints?
Not really. I remember after when we got kind of notice that management was going to piss off and EMI were going to drop the contract, there was a brief period where Ed and I were going to stick around and try and become Lennon and McCartney, and that lasted about a week. And I remember just before Ed left London, I'd already started rehearsing with what was to be the new band. Because, I mean, my girlfriend had left me and I got kicked out, so I was sleeping in a rehearsal room in South London. And, I don't know, maybe it was just a reaction to pomposity, but I kind of got very 50s rock and roll. I think, because, I mean, Ed was going off on his jazz is my life tangent. And I just think, fuck this for a game of soldiers. If I'm going to be in a rock and roll band, it may as well be a bit of a laugh. So I think slightly less pompous was kind of sort of the... I mean, that's not really a direction, I guess. It's more of an attitude. But I wanted to be a little bit less reverential, if you understand that.
What about the introduction of horns to the band sound, which became a big part of it at one stage there? Was that something you'd always been a fan of?
Well, when we were... And I suppose... I mean, I guess there's... No matter who's in the Saints, I guess there's a fairly continual kind of sensibility. And I suppose that probably came from a huge chunk of my youth was spent wasting time listening to just every record I could get my hands on. Certainly changed now, but in those days, I was quite, and indeed was Ed, quite a big fan of R&B music. And, you know, there's lots of horns in that. But there are great orchestrations in a lot of that sort of black music of the 60s. Very special. And also, I've got a really raspy, horny kind of voice, so it seems kind of a natural progression.
Yeah. Point in time where you felt you made the record that you always set out to, that you got it exactly right the way you wanted? The most satisfying album, I guess you could say?
Absolutely not.
No?
No. I mean, at certain times, because it's quite funny, last year we did a what do you call those things? A compilation.
Oh, yeah.
You know, rip-off End of the Millennium like everyone else is doing. Let's do a compilation. God, it's cheap. And so I was listening, because it's not a bad compilation as far as they go, because it covers everything. And it was quite fun mastering that. And in the midst of all of the stuff, I was thinking, oh, it's not such a bad little kind of collection of work. It's all right, sounds good. And the Fool's Day album kind of gets a bit close.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Maybe the next one.
How would you sum up your relationship with, say, both American and English audiences over the years?
Let's see. It's been a while since I've been to the States with a band. The usual comments, I mean, people are pretty much the same everywhere. Doors. One has to watch one's humour in the States, irony not being a strong suit. But apart from that, you know, I think, you know, fill people up for a grog, audiences are the same, God damn it. And yeah, and rock and roll, it's not rocket science. I know it can be quite an emotional experience, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's just, you know, shake your hips, hump music.
How do you think you're perceived by the Australian music fans? Do you think there's a bit of a misconception about you down here?
I've got no fucking clue, actually. I really don't. I haven't. I mean, I used to think that I knew what was going on with my relationship with Martin Knights, but I don't know. I occasionally have the feeling that some folk think I'm some sort of raving queen, which I can be from time to time, but that's certainly not all I am. I don't know. Because I've always thought the Saints were like a good drinking buddy.
Yeah.
Which is part of the Australian myth. I don't know whether... Oh, maybe it is a myth. Well, I don't know. Maybe they love it. So, who knows? Do you know?
No, you got me.
Yeah, I got me too. Quite tragic, really.
Would it be fair to say that the fact that so many musicians have passed through the band over the years, that's in a way kept you sharp as a musician, working with a variety of players?
Personally, it certainly kept me interested.
Yeah.
I mean, I often joke that in real life I'm actually very monogamous and stay-at-home kind of chap. But when it comes to music, I'm an absolute out-and-out slut. And I think that that's a very good thing, actually. Because, I mean, one thing I find this laughable, but in the early 1980s I had a slight fear of becoming a cabaret band, like a pastiche. And whilst how do I say this correct English? Whilst I don't have any respect for show business at all, there's one part of that, I suppose, a little pride compartment. And to become a pastiche of, especially in rock and roll, Cliff Richard should do that and just leave it over there. And I think maybe the whole ramshackle approach I've had to the Saints has perhaps avoided that pitfall. You know, to become just a corporate joke of yourself is not a good look, and it's not the money, is no compensation.
Now, you've been, speaking of corporate side of things, you've been caught up in a fair share of legal wrangles over the years. Can you summarise the worst of that for us?
It's not Kansas, Toto. It's stupid that... I can't pretend to be naive. There's nothing in this business that has anything to do with art or expression or... I don't know. It's all dollars and cents, and there are lots of people who are attracted to this business who would probably be a lot happier, I don't know, selling nuts and bolts or computer chips. Yeah, it's a money thing. Depressing.
How counterproductive was it all in terms of you being able to take time to concentrate on your music?
It's all been and gone, so on a lighter note, it's given me lots of fairly amusing dinner stories. So I'm kind of, bitter and twisted attitude towards it all has kind of dissipated somewhat. It would have been nice because just at the time of the huge American litigation, we were on a kind of very interesting roll, and I was very kind of happy with the group and where we were going. But then, you know, these things are sent to try us, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, as the cliche goes.
So they say. Now, you've travelled around a bit in recent years. How long since you've actually been based down here?
Jesus. Good Lord, it was last century.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it was the late 80s, I think.
Yeah? Where do you think your career may have gone had you stayed here? Or what direction you may have taken?
Oh, I could have become bloody Johnny Farnham, mate.
You could have.
I doubt. All-round entertainment isn't really my strong suit. I was lousy as an actress. I don't know, it's hard to say. Perhaps when I talk to Ed, I could ask him this situation, or this question, because that, I guess, is his situation.
Yeah.
Let's think.
Do you think it was a move you had to make?
Maybe. I suppose Australia now has its kind of grown-up rock guys. I mean, Paul Kelly's very popular. I don't know, there may be a niche in Oz for the Saints. I'm not sure. I mean, I still hope that people have fond thoughts about the group.
I can assure you that.
But I don't really think it's ever mattered, because the Saints have never really been that where we were never seemed to be terribly important. You know, through the 80s, I think we were on the road in Australia every year, and I've been back a couple of times in the past decade. And, you know, we're not pop stars by any stretch of the imagination, but there are enough folk there to give us a few good nights out.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, still what rock and roll is kind of essentially about.
Maintaining your solo career as well as keeping the Saints stuff going. Do you know where the songs are going to be directed when you're writing them, or does that become apparent to you afterwards?
A bit of both. Occasionally, when I get bored, I pretend to be a professional, and I will specifically think I'm going to do, this is a project, I'm going to do this is a solo thing, and it's going to be really wacky. And invariably I get bored with that process, and because I'm very easily distracted and go off on tangents. And I think the only difference between my headspace solo or band is that usually when I'm thinking about the band, I'm thinking about a specific player.
Mm-hmm.
And how he'll approach, you know, a tune. And with solo, I don't care quite so much.
How about your method of songwriting in general? Has that altered much since day one?
Not really. No. I mean, it's quite funny. In the past couple of years, I've become a bit of a computer nerd, which is really embarrassing, but there you go. And one thing I'm quite proud of is I don't use a computer for music, which is really strange, because in the 1980s, before I was a computer nerd, I'd use lots of synthesizers and things.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. I'm quite simple when it comes... Actually, I'm quite simple in a lot of respects. I'm quite simple. My method is quite simple. I try and get an atmosphere with music, and then find the words that kind of, you know, indicate something, with leaving lots of blank spaces for people to fill in themselves.
And just for the folks back home here, could you just run through the current version of the band for us?
It's me, Michael Bayliss, the sex goddess, on bass, Andy Faulkner, the guitar dwarf, it gets better with each passing millennium, and Martin Gerrigord on drums, our Danish sex god.
Yeah.
Sex kitten, actually.
And what's the touring situation for you guys these days?
Let's see. We stopped touring just before Christmas. In fact, we were in Brittany just before that oil spill, which I'm very glad for.
Oh, right.
I'm actually not very glad for the oil spill. I was very glad that we were there just before the oil spill. Very beautiful part of the world, and it's quite tragic. At the moment, we're having a drink break. I'm going to London next week, and as you probably know, it's me, them at the moment, so plans are all being kind of put into and taken out of boxes. And I imagine at the end of spring we'll be in the bus again.
And in the year 2000, recording-wise, anything on the horizon?
Yeah, I've got a very wacky solo record in the can, which I have to mix. I have then a slightly straighter solo project that I've been running for about the past year and a half. And I'm just, with any second now, about to lock in the new Saints album.
Oh, terrific.
Which, I mean, actually we don't have a deal being on at the moment, but probably by the end of the year it may rear its ugly head in the Pacific.
Fantastic. We'd surely welcome you back home for a visit while you're...
In fact, I'm being harassed a lot, especially by Michael, who was very fond of Malula Bar on our last visit. So the band is very keen for me to take them back to the Antipodes.
Oh, tremendous.
They being Europeans. Like the wide open spaces and the cold beer.
Well, hope they talk you into it.
Oh, I'm sure they shall.
Okay, Chris, thanks for your time. It's been a real treat speaking to you. A lot of fun.
John, not a problem.
And we'll look out for you sometime in the year. Hopefully we'll catch you down here.
Okay.
That'll be great. Take care.
See you then. Bye.
Cheers.